Hi, welcome to class. We're the only two right now, but the other ones will show up eventually, right? I hate my life. I hate my life.
A Professor Sunreis Productions!
Hello class, Professor Sunreis here. After a rigorous testing for like probably 3 or 4 weeks, depending on what you count for it, I think I came to the conclusion of what the best Dragon Link version is for the current format. Is it gonna be good? In my opinion not. It's not a competitive deck choice at the moment. We will be going over all of the problems later on in the video, but before we do that, we'll quickly take a quick rundown at the list which I have been using for the past 2 weeks for a few bigger issue ones like 50 people where it just didn't sadly perform all too well. But before we do any of that, of course, don't forget to seal pass on the subscribe button, leave some feedback down below, and let's get right into the video. So if you wanted too long didn't watch of why I think Dragon Link is just not a competitive deck right now, I think it comes to the problem that the Dragon Link struggles to play 12 non-engine while staying competitive and consistent in its game plan of seal passing. To play under all of the hand traps which are being played right now. So if you play 12 hand traps yourself, you struggle with consistency. It's super hard to get more than 12 ways to get going. I'm playing 41 and I'm playing 12. So the consistency is at the bare minimum of like 85% chance of seeing playable basically. You added a few two-card combos in there with like Noctovision plus Lobellion, but like 10 to 15% of the time you will just be bricking. So this is just not something where you want to be at realistically. And add to that, Seal Pass just isn't really a good game plan right now. Even if you go into those simplified game states where usually Dragon Link really shine because you went for like Seal, maybe a Regain Pass, or just a Seal Pass plus some follow-up in your hand, Seal Pass just doesn't do enough against Snake Eyes. Even if you play the Albert's package like I was playing a lot in my testing, you do come into other different problems where your engine is just not really good enough in the current format just because Seal isn't really good enough, and you're kind of forced to play the Rockets because they are the only thing which are really good under like all of these hand traps which are being played, while also being really good extenders if you are actually allowed to pop off and do some plays. So all in all, I think it just comes down to the problem that you're forced to play 12 hand traps main. If you play 9 hand traps main and play a little more engine, I think your win rate going second just crumbles too hard, while your win rate going first isn't great to begin with because of said all hand traps. Yeah, we can go for a black metal summon and then go into a Romulus, but if you get hand trapped on that, we can just make, like, we in theory would just have to make a seal, and then the seal doesn't even really do a lot, so I would much rather go into seal after baiting out a few hand traps here and there and then just hoping it's enough. But overall, Dragon Link felt really awful this format. It always felt like we were on like an uphill battle in all of these hand trap wars where you just compare hands, but we play more bricks, we play less hand traps, and we play less starters. So it felt very bad. Even though against everything else, Bestials are insane. Against Voice, against Branded, against Lab, the deck still feels very fine and very good. So once Snake Eyes gets actually hit, I think this deck is gonna be like in a way better position. Is it gonna be enough to be a competitive deck? Who knows? But let's just get into the card by card. Like I said, 41 cards, 3 Lobellion, 3 Serenia, 1 Magna, 1 Druid, 1 Regain. I think this is pretty standard, nothing else to be said. I think you cannot play more Drew's Worm in the main deck right now because you need hand traps for like stopping your opponent post side and play more, of course, especially because they are pretty good going second against the Snake Eyes as well. And you actually do have a kind of good game plan against that going second. Chaos stuff, 3 Seyfert, 1 Chaos Base. I play this Samsara because it's really good on the draw. So if you think you know your opponent is playing draw, which is getting sided out a little more here and there, or at least people are not playing it altogether. You can go for a Ravine as the first search target, and then Ravine can send a Samsara, and then you can go for Tribute Summon lines over Seal to go into Stringcrows, which is something which I did a lot because Seal doesn't really do anything against Snake Eyes, so I would much rather end on like Dissipator plus IP against that deck than I would end on like Seal plus like an IP maybe. So yeah, Samsara really came up, also being like everything else for like recycling Magna modes, being a good discard. I really like this card. It also plays really well with the Noctovisions, which we are playing, then the Baby Dragons and Levy. Sided Levy out a lot, which is usually something which I didn't do, but these cards were sided out a lot together with something else, which I'll be showcasing you. Like I said, I had to play the Rockets, even though they bricked a lot, and they suck in multiples. I think you kind of have to, just because they give you the best combination of consistency, of always having something to summon, power in the form of all of the synchro payoffs, and then like they're really good into simplified game states where boot sector in theory is kind of good, but the problem is those simplified game states usually don't really have any white boards. It's not like there are like any leftovers on the board, which there are. All of the leftovers are usually turned into an SP or an IP, so it became really hard to get value off the boot sector, and then they kind of underperformed. But I had 3 quick launch, 2 tracer, 1 caliber, a recharger, abs, boot sector, and then the ravine, I guess. And these came out a lot going second. So I probably started this out, and then the Levy plus the Simsterra. We already had 5 side outs, and it felt really good going second. The deck actually felt kind of good. It was just those awkward, yeah, you win the die roll, oh, you bricked, you only had hand traps, and then you're already basically losing, or you had like a very bad hand, and the opponent had 2 ashes, and then they stopped your 1 play, and then they stopped your seal, and then you're suddenly out of engine, and then you just can't really do anything anymore. I had those games a lot, which are pretty standard right now in the format. It's super hand trap wars, and you don't really go wide into your engine, and the moment you go wide into your engine, you basically win. But I just struggled to get into my engine whatsoever. I played 2 Noctivision because I figured it was the best card into those hand trap wars, because any normal summon, be it a Rocket, be it a Samsara or a Seyfried plus a Noctivision, inherently plays super well into hand traps, because we can either go into a Romulus if we have the ability to push through a hand trap, or we can go into a Seal and then have an additional draw to hopefully draw some extra plays to get our engine rolling, or draw more hand traps to stop the opponent. So I really like the Noctivision. Sadly, I could only play 2 because we're already at 41 and we are only playing 12 ways to start, so I didn't want to ruin my consistency, which was already way too low for my liking. I like to have like the 90-ish, like 87 to 90-ish% chance of seeing plays, so yeah, I just couldn't really do it. And I was not playing black metal whatsoever. I figured that black metal was really bad into the format, like I said. The black metal is just a means to an end, right? You usually go for black metal into Romulus to send either a Serenia or a Lubellion or an Abs, and because there are just so many hand traps, this line didn't really feel confident for me. Like, I didn't feel confident in going for it, because if it just means to an end, if I'm getting hand trap, I'd much rather hard draw any of the pieces. So I'd much rather hard draw a Serenia, much rather hard draw a black metal, a Seyfried, much rather hard draw the Rocket card. So I just didn't really see the reason to play it. Red MD, yeah, it does have some utility for going, like, if you are super wide and you can do some pissy lines, but unironically, I don't think I ever touched anything from my extra deck apart from like Striker, Romulus, Seal, and then the IP SP line, and maybe a Synchro. So all of these pissy lines and Borderlands lines, they usually don't really come up anymore, and this is where black metal really shined, which black metal enabled, like this the OTKs with Striker Dragon and Red MD in the graveyard, which you summon off the pissy. All of those things just never came out, and black metal just didn't really feel good because it felt so bad into hand traps. Yeah, it's kind of decent in simplified game set because it gets you 2 bodies on the board, but the problem again is 2 bodies don't really do enough because Seal isn't just great right now. So in my opinion, black metal doesn't really seem that good. I would much rather have like a Bestial plus a Rocket, or like 2 Rockets even, than just having a black metal, just because it just doesn't do enough in my opinion. And the ceiling which we get on from having like a Rocket plus a Bestial plus maybe another normal summon is way higher than having like a normal summon plus a black metal plus a Bestial, just because we will be hit by so many hand traps. We would much rather have all of our pieces hard drawn than get into it via the Romulus line. For hand traps, 12 in the main, the most generic ones: Vader, Imperm, Nib, and Ash. Nib feels very bad. I bricked a lot on this, and simplified game set on those hand traps wars. It's super awkward. Like, you, of course, you want to Imperm your opponent on like the first play, or like Valor it, or Ash, and then maybe they sometimes just stop, and then they already have a follow-up or like some setup, and you are playing into the board, and then you get stopped by hand traps and maybe you enter on a seal or something, and suddenly you have, like, they already have some kind of setup, and suddenly all of those lines which were losing to Nib before don't lose to that, because they can go for like Dark, summon your Dispater out of the graveyard, or whatever things like Dark go into a Princess very early on as like the first thing, because they have so many leftover bodies. So the Nib felt by far the worst in those hand trap wars, but the problem is there's just nothing else to play. All of the other hand traps, even the low impact ones, are not main deck worthy in my opinion, so I think you will just have to stick with it, because Droll is even worse in my opinion. You could argue for Ghost Bell in the main, but I just don't think it. I think I just had like very bad luck with Nib, and it actually is a little better. Extra deck, Striker, Romulus, Seal, pretty standard. You could argue to play 2 Seal because it would be a 2 Seal format, but Seal just sucks against Snake Eyes. Pisty, Triple Airs, Triple Burst, Borderland, you never go into them. If you go into them, you win, but it's super unlikely for you to go into them against Snake Eyes. Against other decks, you can sometimes make it, but not against Snake Eyes. IP, SP, you go into these a lot, usually go for a seal first, and then you afterwards it's SP control, and you try to win from that. Dark, access code, standard, never go into these. Dark especially, usually because I side out the whole Romulus package, basically going second for more Bestials. Dark usually was really, really good because it can then search you a levy and like still do some meaningful plays. But because I expected lots of trolls, I just sided out the levy and have a 1 break less. And yeah, you don't really miss it all too much. I think you have to dumb down your ceiling so hard in this format to be even remotely competitive. So I think it is just fine to leave it like that. And then it is just basically a blank. Maybe sometimes you can summon something out of the graveyard, but then you're probably gonna get hit by a nip if you go into a borrow land line anyways. Synchros, Dispater, Baron, Savage, pretty standard. Then I play 1 or 2 because I side way more Bestials, and I still wanted to have some sort of toolbox vibe. Because we sided the whole Romulus package, our ceiling going second is way, way lower than it should be probably. So I think with playing Bestials, which are super good into the opponent, like Snake I play, if they are comboing and we have hand traps plus Bestials, if we only have those things, we can at least make an Atom and pray that they don't have a hand trap. And then maybe do like a full combo. And one Typhoon in those simplified game state, this card goes hard. Then for the side deck, I really, really like the side deck. I was playing 2 talents. I usually start this in against going second against everything else. I started to play this going first, but it felt so awkward because if Snake Eyes doesn't open any hand trips, they still can play into our board somewhat consistently. So if we have a talent and they only imperm us or they don't have any hand traps whatsoever, we lose because our board isn't good enough without hand traps to stop the opponent from playing. So I only started this in going second against everything else, which isn't Snake Eyes. So against Voiceless Voice, against Lab, against Branded, it was really, really good there. 3 anti-spell. This was either that or Summon Limit, but the problem is that Summon Limit isn't really that good against Kashtira and Flu, and I was really scared of those as shifter decks, and we get hit by collateral damage even harder against that, so I wanted to have something against that, because it's still really, really good against Snake Eyes, of course. Did it save me? Not really. If we get hand trapped super, super hard, and our seal especially gets hand trapped, you still just kind of crumble even if you have a floodgate, because you will just get outgassed afterwards. So it was still fine, but it's definitely not like a solution to the format. 1 called by as well because of all of the hand traps. It's okay. You probably not really see it a lot. And then our game playing against Snake Eyes, 2 Drew Swarm, also really, really good against a plethora of other decks. Voiceless Voice, Lab, Branded. Really, really felt good to play these. Then 2 Mourner and 2 Bell. This is what I side in against Snake Eyes, and then we are at 16 hand traps plus 7 Bestials, which felt really, really good going second. So if we had a lot of hand traps, a Bestial and a Safred, or like a Tracer or a Quick Launch, the deck actually feels pretty, pretty good into the format. So going second, it is kind of decent against Snake Eyes, surprisingly, but the problem is you just kind of crumble against going first, but your going second isn't that much better against the deck that you kind of start to like go blind second against that. Maybe I should try to play that, but it feels super, super bad, and it's probably not the way to go. But yeah, you just have to do this. And Bell also really solid against Lab and against Branded to some degree, but you have so many Bestials against that, you probably don't need it. And then lastly, 3 Draw. Kind of underwhelming, not gonna lie. It's still in there for Voiceless Voice, and against the Fire King variant, it is better than a Bell in my opinion. But yeah, this by far felt like the worst, and I'm thinking about cutting this card completely. So now that that's it for the whole deck, let's quickly go over more reasons of why I think Dragon Link just isn't really the pick right now. So, why is Dragon Link not doing so good right now? Well, it's mostly because there are 12 hand traps main to be basically mandatory. You can't go lower than that, because then you're going second win rate just crumbled super, super hard, or you would have to put way too much of your side deck into like beating Snake Eyes. It can be doable, but you don't really get a lot from it, because you're gonna play against like 70% Snake Eyes to begin with. So you just have to prepare for it in the main deck, and obviously the consistency suffers, like I said, a lot from it, because playing 12 hand traps in the main deck and playing around the format is just super, super hard while staying consistent. Add to that both gameplay adaptations just don't do good right now, because you cannot really go for a Seal pass control game against Snake Eyes because Seal doesn't really do a lot against it, and there are just way too many hand traps, especially Nib, Droll, in the format for you to go into Borderland Pass. They do struggle a lot with it, but the problem is you will probably put all of the resources into it, and then they just can play super wide into it, and then in the end make a Typhoon and just bounce it. And Typhoon is being played a lot right now just because it's so good against all of those like in all of those hand trap wars where like they play into your board, etc, and then you can like last thing Typhoon, bounce the princess, get rid of a few of the resources. Maybe you have a hand trap left in your hand to try to control the game of that. And the last thing, we are hit in the crossfire of all of the things which are being played right now. Bystials are becoming super popular because people notice that they're really good against Snake Eyes. If you pair them with all of the other hand traps, they basically then become almost like the next best thing after like all of the Vader Imperm-esque hand traps. So after Vader, Imperm, Ash, then just comes Moonlit, Nib, and probably Bystial on like in a similar degree, because hitting the target of the Flameburst is really good and basically puts them on Princess control, and that's really easy to OTK with, especially because you already have a body on board to go into a heater line, to go into a dark line. So this just becomes really good. The good things, oh wait, they're just way less than that. Bystials are really good right now. This is also a bad thing because people are playing Bystials, but of course because we do the best out of Bystials, I think we of course benefit the most from it because we can actually get our engine rolling way more than other decks can, and we have a very good matchup spread. In theory, Snake Eyes is a decent matchup, similar to how Unchained was a good matchup for us, but the problem is Snake Eyes is just way too good right now, where we don't really have the ability to profit off that. But against all of the other decks, against Voiceless Voice, Bystials are super good. Against Branded, against Lab, Bystials are still very solid. And then all of the shifter decks kind of got like spread out of the format because they don't really do all too crazy against Snake Eyes unless they draw exactly shifter. So you have a 30% time where your deck is kind of good, but people started playing around that with all of the IP lines, with the Divine Temple, where you still do some meaningful disruption. Like I think you do IP plus one thing on the board to go like for an immediate SP, and then you get more. So it definitely is fine, especially if the hand traps are being played. Shifter isn't really that great of a game plan against the deck anymore. So our matchup spread got a little better by that. And lastly, the things that need to change for us to be an actual meta threat, or at least be like a very good rogue deck into the format, is that we need a hard hit on Snake Eyes as a deck, so that all of our good things against the deck, mostly being like the Bystial on the Flameburst target being a very good disruption, are more impactful. We can play maybe less hand traps or go to a board breaker approach, which we probably can't do, or play less hand traps, just so that we can still combat it with less hand traps, put our consistency higher, have like the 90% chance of seeing plays, be fine with just drawing 1 or 2 non-engine and not needing 3 basically, and overall have a healthier format for us. And most importantly, we need a more mid-range format with the mixed non-engine, because right now, if you get hit by Bystials, it's really hard because you only really have hand traps as non-engine. But if you start to play stuff like Talons, things become different, because suddenly your weaknesses to cards like Bystials become way less obvious, because you can go Talons take, go into a dark, summon the Magnum with the opponent used on you, or like you can Talons take, make an Atom, and full combo because the opponent Bystials you. All of those things you can't really do right now because it's super hard to play anything else but hand traps. But if all of those things change, and those things will change just by a hit on Snake Eyes, because the whole format will shift, not around only Snake Eyes anymore, but against anything else. If Snake Eyes gets hit like on 2 axes, like a consistency hit, or on like 1 hit plus like Snake Eye Ash to 2, or like whatever other things there are to hit the deck, I think the format would go way wider. Voiceless Voice would become more popular. The hard counters against Snake Eyes like Branded would become less popular, yes, but Branded also has a good matchup against Voiceless Voice, so it's probably gonna still stay there. Blab maybe gets picked up a bit more, and then suddenly all of those good form matchups are even more plentiful, and we can suddenly make use out of our good things we have against Snake Eyes, just because it is just a little less good, and it suddenly becomes more like our matchup against Unchained, where yeah, in theory it's still better, but because Bystials are pretty good against the deck, and Rockets are pretty solid as well because of all of the targeting things with Princess and etc., I think we are suddenly in a very, very good position, but that's probably not going to happen for like 1 or 2 months. And in the meantime, there are still some regionals which I want to attend, so I probably won't be playing Dragon Link for those regionals. We'll be probably playing something else, but for that, definitely stay tuned. Definitely will do some Dragon Link content. I tested a lot of other engines, and I want to showcase you guys them. Think of Shadow's Light, Horus versions, etc., etc. I tested a lot with that, and I thought I found some very, very cute things, and I will just be showcasing you guys those things, and especially with Tempai Dragons being up in, like, I think up April. We'll definitely be taking a look at those in the future as well. So stay tuned for that. And without further ado, class is dismissed. You guys are free to leave. Professor Sunreis out. Peace.